Boom! Welcome into Sports Bet. Betting Insight today. Pauly and Teddy, weekend preview edition. Big game breakdown. College football is here. Michigan and Florida, Alabama, Florida State, Texas A&M, UCLA, and BYU and LSU with a site change. All that coming up. Bad beats, bad bets, bad for the books. We start with some bad bets. This could be the worst bet of the season. Central Michigan laying 34. They won in triple overtime at home against Rhode Island and won by 3, 30-27. Would have been a huge, one of the biggest upsets ever if Rhode Island would have got it done, but they lose by 3.
And look, if Rhode Island got the straight up win, it still wasn't going to get the headlines like an Appalachian State beating Michigan or something like that at the beginning of the season. But when you play into triple OT and you're 34-point favorites and the other team commits 6 turnovers and you only get to 30, that's a problem. Central Michigan clearly misses Cooper Rush already.
Yeah, good point there with all those turnovers, and they still had to hang on to win. Middle alert, here we go. It happens all the time. Bad bet. Louisiana Monroe Memphis total bet down from 69 to 61. That was because of the quagmire and all the rain in Memphis. It lands 66. It exploded with 39 second half points.
Yeah, I mean, it really did. Bettors literally caught wind of the wind because the wind was blowing. There was no passing game for either team in that ball game. The field, to call it wet, is something of an understatement. And everything's looking fine. I took a bad number. Yeah. Under 69, great bet. Under 68, good bet. Under 67, good bet. When you start betting under 62 and under 61, now you're putting yourself in potential for harm's way, obviously. Memphis ran for 329. ULM get the backdoor TD with 40 seconds left to play. And this is an early season lesson. You can only chase a line move so far. If you miss the best of the number and you're not even close to getting the best of the number, you can get burned. Books got burned on this one, but so did all the bettors that kept on betting that total down from 69 all the way to 61.
It continues. The Marlins took money. Open $1.60, closed as high as $2 at the MGM properties. I didn't understand that. They lose 3-2 to the Phillies, and the Orioles open 125, closed $1.60. They lost 11-8. Morales, 3 home runs, 7 RBIs for the Jays.
Yeah, I mean, for Miami, they may be back in the wild card race, but the concept of laying nearly $2 with the Marlins, that got bet all the way from -160 to -190 with a second-tier pitcher on the hill. Well, the bettors probably got what they deserved in that one. And for Baltimore, look, Jeremy Hellickson had been pretty good. And the Orioles had been one of the hottest teams in baseball. Look, they scored 8 runs last night. Didn't matter. Hellickson allowed 11 of the 24 batters he faced to reach base. 7 of them scored. He had twice as many walks as strikeouts. The ERA now up to 6.55 for a guy that Baltimore acquired at the deadline to help them win. He didn't get the job done last night.
And for the books, play of the day winner, 1-1. Here was the winner. Buffalo opened 31, closed 22, lost 17-7 at Minnesota. Why all that professional money for a team that was 2-10 last year? They knew with all that experience coming back, they could at least hang in there. And I'll tell you, it's early. Minnesota's quarterbacks stink. Fleck's a good coach. He's got a lot to work with his quarterback. 17-7 Minnesota in this one. It was tough.
Well, yeah, it's another game where the favorite doesn't score as many points as they needed to cover, even if they shut out their opponent. And this is one we talked about at the very beginning, right when the college football lines open. We put this out, Buffalo out as a play of the day, saying this line can't hold. It didn't hold, got bet all the way down. Again, plus 31 at the opener, plus 28 at the opener at most books, all the way down to plus 22. And all the bettors cash. The bookmakers took a bath on Minnesota against Buffalo.
Bad for the books, Ohio State and the over. That's not good. We were on the under. That exploded in the second half. It was Indiana led by 1, then Ohio State ran them out. Also, Oklahoma State and over. Not good. The send out at the South Point games of the year, Oklahoma State was 10. Bet up to 19.5 in some spots. We talked about this game the other day. They have 5 good wide receivers. They have an NFL quarterback in Rudolph, an NFL wide receiver in Washington. They have Hill running the ball. They'll probably average 50 a game this year. Can they get stops, though? They thump Tulsa.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what. If you were hoping to make money with Oklahoma State this year, last night's result about as bad as it gets because the books took a beating on this game. As you mentioned, the early shops opened at 10. The mass market opened 16, Oklahoma State 17, 18, up to 19 and a half in that contest. And when you're talking about a team with 5, not 1, I mean, James Washington was a monster last night. 6 catches, 145 yards, 2 touchdowns. Mason Rudolph, 20 of 24 for 303. But when you're talking about a team, not 1, not 2, they've got 5 wideouts that are as good as any in the country. They're going to give all kinds of secondaries problems this season. Unfortunately, did it on national TV last night and ran it up against a weak foe. Some of that Okie State value, well, I'm not sure we're going to see it again in quite that same way.
And one from baseball, Gio Gonzalez, who had been dynamite, 5-0 with an ERA under 1, and he had the third best ERA in baseball. Well, Davies got it done yesterday. He went 7 innings, 2 earned runs. Gio gave up 5 earned in 6 innings. Milwaukee opened plus $1.10, $1.05 in some spots, closed minus 140. Favorite, Brewers win.
Yeah, I mean, Davies been really good. You talk about Gio, and the markets have been waiting for regression for Gio for months, literally, and they've been betting against him on a fairly consistent basis. Finally, yesterday, they got the money after Gio, as you mentioned, had been on fire for the better part of the last month. Money came against him once again. This time, the bettors cashed.
Let's do it up next. Big game breakdown. Michigan, Florida, and Alabama, Florida State. Number 1 against number 3 to start the season for the first time ever on SportsBet. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Go to SBROdds.com. Browse, compare, and shop live odds available at top online sportsbooks.
Back on SportsBet Betting Insight today. Time for Big Game Breakdown. Always powered and sponsored by BetOnline. Exceptional customer service, strong promotions, and every type of wager that you're looking for out there. Check out the bonus page at sportsbookreview.com for the latest and best offers to open a new account today. Saturday, 3:30 Eastern. Michigan and Florida from Jerry's World. Michigan is 5-43 the total. Shame on the SEC. All right, get the bell out from Game of Thrones. This is the first time since 1991 that Florida has left the state to play a non-conference game. This is the first time since '87 that Florida has opened the season away from Gainesville. Not the way McElwain wanted to start the season. 10 players suspended, including 2 starters. Terrible. They lose Callaway and Scarlett here with all the off-the-field issues, Teddy.
Well, yeah, I mean, Scarlett was their leading rusher, and Callaway their leading returning receiver. So we are talking about the potential for an impact from these suspensions. But one thing bettors need to be aware of is that teams like Florida, yeah, the frontline guys get suspended. Guess what? The backups are pretty good, and the backups to the backups are pretty good. You're not seeing bottom-tier talent on a roster like Florida's. Look at the quote from Jim McElwain. Quote, "It's an opportunity for more guys to play and play their tails off." But the bigger issue, or at least as big an issue as the suspensions for Florida, this team has no senior starters on the offensive line. So you have pieces missing, the leading rusher gone, the leading receiver gone for suspension. You have a relatively inexperienced offensive line. And oh, by the way, when it comes to the quarterback battle for Florida, look, there's no question who the most talented guy was. Felipe Franks. He won the QB battle. He's a 6'6", 227-pound redshirt frosh. But the fact that he beat out the former starter at Florida, Luke Del Rio, and the former Notre Dame starter, Malik Zaire, means we've got a guy who doesn't have the requisite level of collegiate experience playing behind an inexperienced offensive line, going up, without his top skill position weapons. It's not necessarily an optimal spot for the Gators and Felipe Franks in that regard.
Well, he catches a break because Michigan might have the most inexperienced defense of any Power 5 team. They didn't even release their roster until Wednesday night, and no depth chart. One service projects that as many as 6 freshmen could start on defense. They only return 1 starter, and they lose 5 of their top 6 tacklers from last year as they put all those guys in the NFL. I guess it's got to be Spade at quarterback, but Harbaugh is insane. Started 12 of 13 games last year. The battle with O'Korn and Peters as well. Harbaugh quote on the QBs, they've all been great. The best thing about all 3 is they're completing passes, consistently accurate, and they haven't been turning the ball over. It's been really good that way. They're making plays, making big plays, and very, very, very minimal with mistakes, mental mistakes. You can't find a mistake, end quote. I'm surprised at this line, even with the suspensions, because Michigan lost so much, and I think they're going to be down.
Well, that's the whole thing that's really a shocker on this, is that the money is knee-jerked against Florida. Suspensions, boom, automatically the money starts to come against. But when you're talking about returning experience, I mean, Michigan has none. On the defensive side of the football, on the offensive side of the football, this team suffered enormous graduation losses. And again, just like Florida, it's not a situation where the cupboard is bare. Jim Harbaugh has recruited well. It wasn't like the cupboard was bare when he got there. Michigan has talent, but in this level of a ball game, this is a big-time game in a big-time atmosphere. Experience matters. Team that make mistakes will get screwed. Harbaugh's talking about his quarterbacks aren't making mistakes. I just worry about that defense making a bunch of mistakes. Fascinating game to consider, Pauly, but a very difficult game to wager on. Not one that I've got the ticket in my pocket on.
Yep, have to sit it out. Have to sit this one out as far as I'm concerned. Game number 2. Bet online number, look at this, number 1 against number 3. Florida State, Alabama from the brand new Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. Saturday, 8 o'clock Eastern on ABC. Bama is 7, 49.5 the total. Brent Musburger told me today Saban's, I think, 10-0 all-time against former assistant coaches. So you have that angle. And Alabama kicking ass and taking names against top teams the last 5 years. 5-0 straight up and 4-1 ATS. The wins are against Michigan, Virginia Tech, West Virginia, Wisconsin, and USC. Last year was 52-6 over USC. The non-cover was West Virginia, and they beat them by 10.
Yeah, and even the West Virginia game, they had opportunities to cover. But you're talking about a team that has a very clear track record. They come out of the gate, and you said it, they kick ass and take names. And it's not even just the last 5 years. You can go back further than that for Saban. But when you're talking about the last 5, we're every year facing a top-tier foe. Last year's beatdown of USC. USC turned out to be a pretty good team last year. This is not anything when it comes to an exception. That has been the rule. Saban, with extra time to prepare, has been nasty. And, of course, Saban's going up against Jimbo Fisher, who was his former offense coordinator at LSU. Here's his quote. Look, it's been a little more traditional. And I think that's a good thing because they beat you with execution. That's why I saw discipline and focus to attention to detail are going to be very important in this game because that's the kind of team we're playing. Of course, Alabama's been pretty good at discipline, focus, and attention to detail. And, of course, they've got a new offensive coordinator in Brian DeBall, the guy who spent 11 out of 17 years as an assistant with the New England Patriots. And we're talking about a team that is absolutely loaded with weapons to run the football. Calvin Ridley's back at wide receiver. Jalen Hurts, the SEC Offensive Player of the Year as a freshman, now back for his sophomore year. It's not like the Crimson Tide don't have a lot of weapons to work with on the offensive side of the football.
Florida State 78-17 under Fisher. Only 8 losses by more than 7 points since he got the job prior to the start of 2010. How about that? How do you beat Nick Saban? Nick Saban can't stop mobile quarterbacks who are accurate. He also has a big issue with no-huddle, up-tempo spread. Gives him fits. Can't stop it. That's his bugaboo. Now you have Francois, who's mobile, and you saw Watson carve up Alabama the last 2 years. Will Florida State go hurry up and up-tempo in this one?
And that's an interesting question, okay? We talked earlier in the show about, what the hell were the Indiana Hoosiers doing? Going up-tempo against Ohio State. Didn't work out well for them. You don't normally see the underdog trying to push the pace. But this is clearly where Alabama's defensive weakness has been against up-tempo offenses and mobile quarterbacks. And, we saw Clemson do it with success in the national championship game. And, of course, we have a mobile quarterback in Francois who had, 482 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground last year for Florida State. But it's a Florida State team that may have some issues on the offensive line. And we're going to talk a lot about offensive lines on this show, because that's how you win in college football. You're betting against bad offensive lines. You're betting on good offensive lines. The offensive line, only one senior in the two deep, both tackles in their first year as starters, and 2 offensive line starters, the center and the guard, missed spring practice, meaning that this mad cobbled together unit hasn't even had a full opportunity to gel yet. So that's my biggest concern with Florida State, especially going up against that powerful Alabama front 7.
We roll on up next, BYU LSU with a site change, and Sunday, A&M against UCLA on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Research before you bet. Be sure to check out SBR Picks for the best game predictions, breakdowns, and much, much more.
Back on SportsBit, Betting Insight today. Big game breakdown rolls on. Always powered by BetOnline. BYU and LSU Saturday night, 9:30 on the East Coast on ESPN. Site change. BYU LSU from the Superdome in New Orleans. LSU is 14.5, 47 the total at BetOnline. LSU will treat this like a home game. We'll see if the BYU fans show up here. Short notice with the travel arrangements because of all the mess in Houston. LSU will bus to New Orleans, leaving Baton Rouge around 8:30 p.m. and arriving at 10. They'll eat their team meal tonight, Friday night at the Stadium Club in the South End Zone before checking out a movie. Big edge to LSU here, Teddy.
Well, certainly from a situational standpoint, it is an edge for LSU because obviously, number one, BYU had a bunch of fans that were going to Houston. Oops. Now the game's in New Orleans. And clearly they're not going to have anywhere near the same fan base. What was once ostensibly a neutral site game is now clearly a home game or a home type game for LSU. The markets have responded accordingly, obviously, with the Tigers up to 14.5-point chalk now against BYU, especially after BYU looked so dicey last week. We'll talk about that in just a minute.
Yep. So here we go. This is big. A new offensive coordinator at Alabama, a new OC at Ohio State, and a new OC with LSU. It's Matt Canada, and you got to get the passing attack going. I mean, LSU's quarterback play has always been atrocious. They always have a great running back, but they can't throw the ball. So can Canada fix this, Teddy?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, they have a weird-looking offense on paper. They've got a triple option with Danny Etling at QB, but not just 3 run options. There are also pass plays built in. Let's look at the quotes from some of the LSU guys talking about how this offense has looked in practice. Here's a left tackle, KJ Malone. I can see how it's hard for a defense to game plan around it, just because you don't know who's going to get the ball. I've been with the offense through the spring, and I still don't know who's going to get the ball sometimes. Here's a linebacker, Devin White, talking about practicing against this offense. It's the hardest thing to defend in the world. You've got so much different movements going on. You could say you can say it's an option. He's got options to run and pass in the same play. It's hard. They know what they're doing, but I don't know what they're doing. That's the glory of it. So this is a BYU team that has no film on this offense, really doesn't have a lot to go with. And from all reports, it's going to be nasty to defend. Of course, the question is how good Danny Etling can be in this role. I mean, he's not the guy with a ton of upside at the QB position, but he's got plenty of skill position weapons around him, most notably Darius Geis, arguably the nation's best running back. He had oral surgery last week, but he is expected to play on Saturday. And obviously this guy is a monster. Worth noting, though, the LSU defense, they're going to be without Arden Key. He's their best pass rusher, a potential All-American. And they also lost Andre Anthony, a key backup at the defensive end position.
You struggled on offense last year with Ty Detmer, the OC, and then they struggled to start the season against Portland State. You could say they were looking ahead to the game, which I understand, but they only had 13 first downs and won 20-6. Sataki, the head coach, obviously I wish we could have played differently and not made so many mistakes. I know what our coaches are capable of and what our players are capable of. If we had played our best game and the same result would have happened, I would have been grateful for the win, but a little nervous about how good we are. Mangum, the quarterback, has an NFL arm, but you worry if there's enough weapons around the field to move the ball and to be able to light it up against LSU. This is tough, too. They go LSU, Utah, and Wisconsin back to back to back, Teddy. It's a brutal schedule.
And BYU's done this before, and they've done very well in this underdog role against some of these elite Power 5 conference schools. We saw them do it last year and have success and play all of these wild, tight games that came down to the wire. Okay, you have a quarterback with an NFL arm. The questions you have is whether the offensive line can protect for him, whether there's enough skill position talent to get separation against that LSU defense. But, you know, it's an offense that didn't work well in season 1 of the Ty Detmer era and didn't work well last week. Now they're going up against an elite defense. Mangum's got to make some plays this week if BYU's going to hang around and if this game's going to get enough points to get up and over the total. We'll get back to this one when it comes to play of the day time.
Last game. This one is Sunday. as I mentioned earlier, A&M and UCLA on Fox, 7:30 Eastern. Bet online number, UCLA 3.5, 56.5 the total. 31-24 A&M last year at home. They were 4.5 in overtime. They were up big and then blew it, and then they won in OT. It was 24-9 in the fourth quarter. Rosen with touchdown drives of 77 and 64 yards. He had 343 passing yards but 3 interceptions. A&M is 44-21 and 3-2 in bowl games in the SEC under Sumlin, but he's on the hot seat, so is Moore. It could be a loser leaves town match here. Already both coaches on the hot seat, and the loser here is in trouble. A.D. Scott Woodward on the SEC Network in May. Kevin knows he has to win. He has to win this year. He has to do better than he's done in the past. Sumlin, listen, the pressure on feelings, the same pressure I feel all the time, and so nobody puts more pressure on me than me. And my job is every year I look at what we do and what we do well. We want to stay ahead of the curve. Probably the only reason he's still there is because he has an astronomical buyout. Although you're both coaches on the hot seat here. What do you think, Teddy?
I mean, again, Sumlin is 44-21 as Texas A&M's head coach. He's 3-2 in bowl games. We're not talking about a coach that's had a bad record or a bad track record or has been mediocre. He's been good. Apparently, that's not enough. And
they haven't done shit since
Manziel left. Well, he had a pretty good run with Johnny Manziel. Let's put it that way. And it's not like A&M has stunk up the joint. They just haven't been one of the elite SEC teams. Guess what? It's hard to be an elite SEC team. I am a believer in Sumlin as being a good coach, but in the SEC, expectations are sky high everywhere. And every loss is like, the sky is falling. It's not quite as bad in Westwood with UCLA. But you mentioned Jim Mora. He's very well on the same type of hot seat that Kevin Sumlin's on. And another guy, he did great with somebody else's recruits. Newhouse's recruits did just fine. Has not done particularly well with his own. Let's not forget how far this program fell at the end of last season. They went 1-5 straight up after Josh Rosen got hurt. And their only win during that span came against hapless Oregon State.
I think Rosen's good. He has to stay healthy, and we'll see what he has for weapons around him. But here we go again, where there's a new offense and a new offensive coordinator, Teddy.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, the third offense coordinator in 3 seasons. You have Jed Fish taking over after 2 years under Harbaugh at Michigan. So it's a guy who has a pretty good track record, but third offense coordinator in 3 years for a NFL talent at quarterback. That concerns me. Here's a quote from Jim Mora about the new offense. Quote, "I like the multiplicity of it. My belief has always been that you have a series of concepts in your back pocket and you pick the concepts out that best fill the skill sets that best fit the skill sets of your players. I think Jed does a really good job of that. I think he's able to create mismatches through personnel groupings, motions. He looks for matchups, which I've always believed in." So how ready is this offense going to be? Here's a quote from Josh Rosen. Quote, "He doesn't want me to go into a game with anything I'm less than supremely confident in. At the same time, I want him to have as big of a call sheet as he wants. So it's on me to put as much of my time into it as I can let him have as much freedom as he can." So it sounds like they're going to try to open up the playbook a little bit. How successful that is, maybe another story entirely.
All right, very good. Money time, play of the day. Back to BYU, LSU from New Orleans. Betting number 307, 308. Let's go up and over the total, 47. Geis, they're going to give him the ball, and they're going to throw him the ball. We believe in Canada, the new OC, to open up that offense. It could be a blowout as well. We could have garbage points with BYU getting some garbage late and moving the ball as well. Let's go over BYU and LSU. Have a great weekend. We're back Monday for the holiday show, but we'll have a short show. But we got Tennessee, Georgia Tech to talk about and recap everything that happens this weekend on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.